Hello again everyone and welcome back to The Underground. This is the Until update for August 17th through the 23rd, 2025. Things are moving forward at quite a rapid pace, so we've got a lot to cover this week, and let's get right to it. The flavor this week has been immigration, both at home and overseas. Around the United States, there have been many developments in the field of legal and illegal immigration and the challenges that the United States is working through on that front. And our friends across the pond are also coming to grips with some of the issues that they face that are very similar to what we're working through here in the United States with regards to legal immigration. The issue of legal versus illegal immigration is a very hard topic to broach. A lot of people are very much in favor of legal immigration, but are not in favor of illegal immigration. Some people support legal and illegal immigration, and other people don't support legal or illegal immigration. So it's a hard topic to broach. It's kind of a very divisive issue, obviously. And the one thing that unites both sides of the argument, unfortunately, is narcotics and crime. So the United States is doing what they can to try to combat that sort of thing, and we'll dive more into this highly divisive issue in just a moment. Similar story in the United Kingdom. The UK is facing, I would say, more of an advanced civilizational crisis with regards to population shift and population displacement. So we'll have to get more into that in just a moment to kind of understand why some of these flagging operations are very, very important in the United Kingdom. But suffice it to say, a lot of these immigration problems are coming to light. And the seriousness of immigration issues, as they are very, very closely linked to counter-narcotics operations, has been very sharply demonstrated this week. Once again, the classic line must be uttered: the past 48 hours has been host to significant naval activity. Over the past few days, the U.S. Navy has deployed significant naval assets, all with the goal of taking up station off the coast of Venezuela to combat drug trafficking. Originally, the U.S. Navy, the White House, and the Pentagon all announced this effort as being really just a task force of 3 destroyers, which is a fairly common thing. It's not really a new thing. The U.S. Navy and the U.S. Coast Guard have been conducting patrols of the Caribbean Sea and, down off the coast of Narcoland for a long time. So that's not really new. What is new is sending an ARG, or an amphibious ready group. Whenever a few thousand Marines embark on a MEU and head down south, we should probably pay attention to this quite a bit. Now, this deployment by the Iwo Jima ARG has been sort of up in the air. The Iwo Jima was originally scheduled to go to 6th Fleet AOR, which is the Med and Europe, right? So she was supposed to go on a regular deployment there, but now recent statements over the past couple of days have made it sound like she's going down south to Central or South America. So this is exactly the kind of deception operation I would expect if we are trying to put boots on ground in Venezuela, for instance. Again, right now that's speculation. There's been no talk of that whatsoever, but you can't ignore a few thousand Marines on board a flat top going down to Central America. So we've got enough resources down there to put up a pretty good fight if a war were to kick off. It could just be intimidation. It could just be a standard routine deployment kind of thing. So I don't want to raise any alarm bells unjustly. However, we've got to keep this in mind. She was supposed to go to Europe, and now at the last minute, we're changing deployments, right, to go down to South America. And if you're trying to keep the cartel guessing, right, then that's exactly what you would do. Also, what you would do is send a task force of 3 destroyers down there to, allegedly, in heavy air quotes, combat ships at sea, right, conduct visit board search and seizure or VBSS operations, when really the Aegis ships are down there to provide missile defense. We saw the exact same thing happen in the Middle East. Remember a couple of months ago we saw that, there just so happened to be one day like 3 or 4 aircraft carriers right within range of anything that might go wrong. So the same kind of flavor certainly appears to be undertaken right now in the Atlantic. What is going to happen? I don't know. It could just be a standard deployment or a show of force. The White House loves their shows of force, don't they? So it could just be a posturing thing, but something to keep an eye on over the next few days. You'll probably see me writing quite a bit about this, and I'm going to be extra attentive to look for any signs of large-scale conflict or some kind of action down there. So as we can see from the overall strategic movement, things are getting pretty serious when it comes to counter-cartel and counter-narco operations, and more importantly, how these are tied to immigration issues here in the United States. So here at home in the United States, we have had a lot of kinetic events occur this week, but the one that I wanted to mention is the recent announcement by the White House that the National Guard is going to be deployed to 19 states now. to assist with immigration issues, to assist with crime initiatives, and so on. As of right now, when I'm recording this, I don't have a whole lot of details on what's going on with this, but I do have the list of states, which are Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Mexico, Ohio, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Virginia, and Wyoming. So again, 19 states where National Guard soldiers are going to be activated federally, I'm guessing, for anti-crime initiatives and to assist with immigration efforts. Once again, very few details. I'm very curious as to see what title orders these guys are going to be on, because as we can see, these are mostly conservative states, so I don't know if the governors are going to be in the chain of command here or if this is a federal deployment. I'll know, I'm sure, by the time this brief comes out, but this is just something to keep in mind. The total number of soldiers deployed is going to be around 1,700, so we're not talking a whole lot, but if we remember from the COVID era when a lot of National Guard deployments were occurring, what we saw is just a dozen soldiers here, a dozen soldiers there, maybe 100 tops in this one city, and then suddenly they got a lot bigger. So same thing with the whole deployment to DC post J6, right? That was a thing where they tried to hide the numbers a lot. And I'm not saying these really sort of nefarious kind of historical things are linked to what's going on now, but it's something to keep an eye on because 1,700 can become 17,000 really quickly. And nobody would know because they're going off of the old numbers. So I don't know. It's something to keep an eye on. It's interesting how we've gone from Washington, D.C. still being a crime-ridden hellhole, just with a lot of uniformed guys walking around. And now we've expanded to the entire United States, right? Things are so much up in the air these days. But for right now, at this snapshot in time, President Trump has stated that Chicago is next. They're going to deploy National Guard to Chicago. And after Chicago, they're going to go to New York. That's the story as of right now, and then now we've learned that it's actually 19 states, none of which include New York or Illinois. So I don't know if we're going to add New York and Illinois to this list to become 21 states. I don't know. Either way, we're just going to have to see how this works out, but rest assured, I am going to be watching this quite carefully. Things are changing by the day, and we're just going to have to take things as they come. And speaking of the whole immigration issue, I wanted to issue a brief update to the Chaudhary family smuggling operation, human trafficking, child slavery operation in Omaha, Nebraska. So as of yesterday, a couple of local news media groups have discovered that 2 of the 4 hotels have been closed down, or at least they had, law enforcement closed for investigation signs on the front doors of these hotels. Zero communication, of course, from the owners of the hotels because the owners of the hotels are in prison right now. But the hotels that were closed were the New Victorian and the American. However, the other 2, they're owned by the same people and the same family. They seem like they're still open. It's hard to say. They may have been closed overnight. If the first 2 were closed, I would assume the second 2 are going to be closed as well. But one interesting detail that came out from the local news media talking about this is, of course, the news media, local news stations especially, are going to come at this from a specific angle. And the angle that the news media was coming at this story from is the customer service impact to this. So really, the local news was focusing not on the fact that children were being held as slaves at these hotels. They kind of ignored that part, but what they are focusing on is the inconvenience of people showing up to check into their hotel room or being evicted from their hotel rooms with zero notice, right? So they're talking about a lot of that, which of course should not be surprising to anyone. But one detail that they kind of passively let on is that a lot of these hotels were used as long-term residences by people who could not get lodging any other way. This by itself is ordinarily not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of people are living in hotels nowadays simply because the situation is pretty dang desperate in some places around the country. So that's not any kind of nefariousness on its own. What is nefarious is the fact that you've got a lot of long-term customers and a lot of long-term residents at a hotel where there is child slavery taking place. That is very suspicious because this could be a much larger slavery child trafficking network than we knew that it was, right? Surely people who lived there long-term would know whether or not there's kids being employed at this place to clean rooms and stuff like that. So much more investigation is needed. So at least the feds are doing something in this case, thankfully, for once. But again, it's a day late and a dollar short, right? This is almost 3 weeks after the initial arrests, right? The fact that there were not closed signs on the hotel the very day the raids occurred is disturbing. But 3 weeks later, hopefully not that many more children were trafficked in that 2 or 3 week time frame. And hopefully the other two sites that we've identified and the whole world has identified will be shut down fairly soon as well. But no guarantees on any of that. So I guess we're just going to have to wait and see, monitor these kind of things, because unfortunately nowadays the average citizen has to advocate and urge the feds to actually arrest someone when a crime is committed. So that's just kind of the way that it is. And a lot of times there's not a whole lot the average citizen can do. So getting down to the actual regions today, this is more of a nationwide concern, but I did want to remind everyone that the FDA recall on the radioactive shrimp has expanded because of course it has. This is of course a shell game of food distribution, so the company PT Bahari Makmur Sejati is actually known in the US as BMS Foods, which is an Indonesian company, and they sell raw shrimp or frozen shrimp to at least two other companies. In this case, Southwind Foods and Beaver Street Fisheries, and those companies repackage that shrimp as their own brand. Well, this becomes a problem when 4 shipping containers full of shrimp were detected to be radioactive or contaminated with the radioactive isotope cesium-137. Cesium-137 is, of course, produced as a byproduct of nuclear fission, and it is of course something that you would not typically want in your seafood. Now, just to hammer home the importance of this, I don't really care about the frozen shrimp. The frozen shrimp are irrelevant, to be honest, because the FDA has stated that the shrimp themselves were not necessarily contaminated, they're potentially contaminated. What was contaminated? The shipping containers that these shrimp were shipped in, which is the more concerning part, because 4 shipping containers were discovered at the same time at 4 different ports: Miami, Los Angeles, Savannah, and Houston, and all 4 were radioactive. There could be more containers than that. They're really keeping tight-lipped on this sort of thing because this is very obviously a very big counterterrorism concern. So bottom line, a food contamination issue could have just accidentally highlighted the concern that maybe some radiological supplies were smuggled into the United States, or at least were attempted to be. There is some debate about this quite a bit as to whether or not you would find cesium-137 in, say, something like a dirty bomb or some kind of radioactive contamination. It's hard to say. There's a lot of back and forth on that, but just speaking very generally, when a shipping container shows up at one American port and it's radioactive, that's a little concerning, because you're wondering what was in that shipping container before or what was it next to. But when 4 shipping containers, at least 4 shipping containers show up at 4 different ports all around the United States, that's a little bit more of a concern. Now, just to balance this out, I know that a lot of people are going to freak out once they actually read the story and find out that it's not the shrimp, it's the containers. Once the social media influencer circle reads the articles for once, people are going to get spun up over this, and it's interesting, but radioactive stuff tries to come into the United States a lot. So I don't know. I would be very, very interested to hear a press statement by Customs and Border Patrol on this to see what they've got to say and what they're willing to say. And I think they should be asked the questions of what's the deal with this? What's the history? What's this company's deal? And so on. I mean, if it's just a case of unsanitary conditions like the FDA is saying, okay, fine, but I want to hear that from the people who know what a dirty bomb looks like, not the FDA, right? They've clearly isolated the isotope, which is not that hard to do. A lot of the handheld scanners that are used by Customs to scan stuff for, contamination, they can do this on the fly, but sampling the actual radioactive particles, the dust or whatever is on these containers would be helpful, and they can definitely isolate where that source came from. So if it was part of, say, like the Fukushima leak from a few years ago, just some kind of contamination tied to that would be very nice to know. But just be wary about what you see on social media over the next few days, because I guarantee you people are going to start freaking out about this, and really it's just one of those things where more temperance is needed. Sort of in the same vein of panic is the revelation in Washington, D.C. the other day that there are 55 million visa holders in the United States, and the White House is looking at investigating all of those visa holders for potential immigration fraud, like visa overstays. That's a really common thing. And as one might imagine, this has really resulted in the general public saying, how many visa holders are there? Yeah, it turns out 55 million is kind of a lot. So the White House has been really kind of trying to avoid this question, I think. because the White House is most certainly all about legal immigration, right? That's what the Trump administration is very much hanging their hat on. A lot of conservative power players are also really trying to focus on halting the illegal immigration while bringing forth more legal immigration. And it turns out that 55 million legal visitors to the United States is still a pretty big number. So I just wanted to remind everyone that the U.S. population is around 340 million. At least that's what they're publicly stating it to be based on the last census data. And if you add on 55 million people to that, that's a pretty big percentage. As far as what illegal immigration is, I mean, if there's 55 million legal visitors here that could get visas, then you would have to assume that there are more illegal immigrants, right? That's a pretty big revelation, and since that just came out yesterday, I think a lot of people are trying to come to terms with it and figure out what this actually means, because, yeah, it's a big number, and it turns out that this is probably a much larger problem than we had originally previously identified. And that brings us to Florida, more specifically Mr. Harjinder Singh and his recent arrest for his involvement in causing the crash that killed 3 people on the Florida Turnpike a couple of weeks ago. I have been investigating Mr. Singh here just as a very interesting thought experiment, and it turns out, as you could probably assume very easily based on the story, that Mr. Singh is not at the center of this story. So some of you have already seen it, but I'm not going to show my full homework on this just yet because a little bit of discretion is necessary when tracking some of these networks. But the short version of this is that Mr. Singh is not the center of this. Harjinder Singh worked for a company called Whitehawk Carriers, which can be traced back to one Navneet Kaur, who is probably acting as a registered agent service. So once you investigate Navneet Kaur a little bit, you can find out that this individual, which I'm assuming is a female because most of the names I searched came up as female, so I'm just going to call her a she. But this individual, it turns out to be the owner and registered agent of a lot of very similar companies that are nearly identical to Whitehawk Carriers, all of which are registered at a different address, which is usually a residential address. So what's going on here? Seems like an interesting data point, but what's going on here? Well, you might be tempted to think that Ms. Navneet Kaur here is the center kingpin in all of this. That's probably not it. She is probably just the paperwork boss, right? She's probably just the person who is registering these companies for illegal immigrants, because even in California, some of these people who may have criminal records don't want to be popping up in LLC databases. So that's probably what's going on here. I have a lot more evidence to back that up, but it's a fairly common thing to see. I know that this link analysis chart here looks a little bit busy, and you can kind of see where Harjinder Singh is in this whole thing, and Ms. Navneet Kaur here is that green dot, which is at the center of all these other LLCs and other locations and businesses and things like that. So there are links between a lot of these, and I am currently developing this out. This is just my homework as of a few days ago, but I just wanted to show you that this is much larger than just one guy in a truck, which makes sense at face value, right? But in this case, you might be expecting it to have like a CEO, and then underneath the CEO, you've got different branch division heads, and then maybe underneath that, you've got different parts of the company, all with co-workers, and it's, a nice, neat hierarchy. Well, in the case of a lot of these truck driving networks, they're not. You really have to track them using the mentality of counterinsurgency. Now, of course, not all of these people are terrorists, right? But when it comes to tracking them and trying to develop out these networks, you can very clearly see these are cellular networks. There's one group of people that is not connected to another group of people, but they're linked by a common point, such as a registered agent. So even if these companies are not talking to one another, they're all still managed by a central point. And who's controlling that central point, right? I want to know who Navneet Kaur is working for. She may not be working for anybody. She may just be opportunistic, because a lot of these companies I'm finding are registered in the exact same building. Like if you were to look at the building on Google Maps, across the street is an immigration services office. So something that helps people get citizenship. So the bottom line is that this is a very interesting investigative line of effort, because we want to know who's accountable, right? Obviously, Harjinder Singh here, he's been arrested. He's going to jail for a long time because he killed 3 people. But the next question you must ask, especially if you live in a society and you want accountability, is who did he work for? Well, he worked for Whitehawk Carriers. But did he? This could just be his own LLC that he's got registered through somebody else and he's just acting alone. My own investigation seems like that's not really the case. A lot of these are linked together, but in any case, this one guy's incident has identified and really brought to light just how pervasive this problem is. Now, I don't want to make it out to look like this is some kind of grand new revelation. No, there are a lot of people, especially people who are in the trucking industry, who have been shouting and screaming about this for many, many, many years. It's just nobody's listened to them because logistics is boring, right? And nobody cares about the issues of trucking, even though they absolutely should. So please don't think I'm stumbling upon something grand and unrevealed. No, this has already been well known for a very long time. It's just that now is a good time, because we're looking at all of these other immigration issues. Now is a good time to reassess what's going on here, because now people, for once in their life, are actually paying attention to what's going on around them. And unfortunately, I think there's also a lot of information manipulation. A lot of people will point and shout and say, oh, look at this guy, look how evil he is. He's just a terrible person, right? But then they don't go the next step further and say, all right, well, we can hold this guy accountable. Sure, that's easy enough. But can we hold accountable the registered agent who is breaking even California law by registering a bunch of businesses in her name that she doesn't own? You see, it's just a paper mill, right? It's just an LLC paper mill. It's a shell game. That's what it is. And we want to hold the guy accountable because we've got a mean-looking photo of him. But nobody wants to go the next step and say, well, let's dismantle this network here. Let's look into these addresses. This guy's address is listed right on the California Secretary of State's website. It's not like it's that hard. And the feds have other databases. You can look and see how many people with visas, how many visa holders listed as their mailing address, the same address used for this guy. This is simple stuff. So we've definitely got to keep pressure on this sort of thing, because unfortunately there is only so much the average citizen can do. I can sit here and talk all day long on YouTube, and I can sit here and show you all of my research, but I have no power at the end of the day. I can't go out and issue an arrest warrant for all of these people I've identified. I would like to, but I can't. I don't work for government, and we are beholden to an attorney general somewhere or a federal agency somewhere to actually do their job. And so far, in most cases, the same people who have been employed in government forever are still employed under the Trump administration, which is why you see a lot of times not a whole lot being done. In this case, one guy was arrested. That is fantastic. This is good. We can give him his due process, and he can explain himself in court. But I would also personally like Miss Navneet Kaur to see the inside of a courtroom and explain why she's registering so many businesses to illegal immigrants in her state. So anyway, this shows how spicy things have gotten around the United States, but things have gotten even spicier in the United Kingdom across the pond. So I, of course, mean the flagging operations that have taken place throughout England over the past few days. This has rapidly become a very big social thing that has occurred throughout the country. And for an American audience, I thought I would explain just a little bit. Throughout most of Europe, it's fairly odd, it's fairly strange to see national flags flying really anywhere. The concept of having your national flag displayed like at your front door or something like that, that's definitely an American thing. The concept of patriotism as Americans know it just does not apply anywhere else in the world. Or actually it does, it's just not Western Europe. So Western Europe, Eastern Europe as well, tend to not have like national flags out as much as you might expect. And in the UK, things have gotten quite severe over the past few years with regards to what is considered to be a hate crime. So much so that flying the Union Jack, the flag of the United Kingdom, displaying that flag at, say, like a Hindu cultural event, that can actually get you arrested, right? Much more so the flag of England, which is the St. George's Cross, which not only conveys the idea of the English people, right, but also there's a saint involved, right? So a Christian component to this is equally forbidden in many circumstances in the UK, unfortunately. And over the past few days, a huge, and I mean huge, effort has been undertaken to conduct flagging operations, which is probably the best way to describe it. And what this is super simple. It's literally just putting the English flag up in England. That's it. That's what this is. Some people have taken to graffiti, so painting what they call zebra crossings, pedestrian crossings, right, with red paint to make the pedestrian crossings look like little St. George's flags. So you can kind of understand how that's a little bit more secret, but generally speaking, one of the primary ways that the British people are showing acts of resistance is simply putting up their own nation's flag within their own nation. Now, again, to an American audience, this seems incredibly sad, and it may be, but I would rather focus on the good part of this, right? So there's a lot of people who are trying to do the right thing and inspire and bring a lot of hope to the English people, and potentially facing arrest or great violence to do so. A few flagging teams have been roughed up pretty bad when they get caught, and one guy was hit in the head, injured pretty severely last night in Stevenage, just north of London, where, again, he's trying to conduct flagging in an area, and someone threw a Molotov cocktail at him, but it hit him right in the head. So pretty violent sort of thing. You know, the British people are having to risk imprisonment and serious bodily harm just to put up their own nation's flag, and it's a good thing that we're starting to see this level of resistance come out, I think. Resistance to what exactly? I don't know if you can even define it. Just resistance to all the badness of the world. One of the ways to do that is to bring a sense of shared unity and shared national identity, because the United Kingdom, much like the United States, is facing an identity crisis. Theirs is much worse than ours, of course, and one of the ways that you can start to identify, what does it mean to be an Englishman? What does it mean to be a Scot? What does it mean to be Welsh, right? Well, the land of Albion is figuring this out right now, and they're going to have to figure it out over the next few years too. This is one of those things that is within the realm of the English to start to bring to the table. It's peaceful, doesn't hurt anybody, and it's less vandalism than has been conducted by official government agencies to plaster rainbow flags and all other kinds of paraphernalia all over government buildings. So basically, there's no way to complain about this that doesn't make you sound crazy, because there's the flag of India and Pakistan being flown over government buildings. So this is one of those things that's very innocent and harmless, and even the most hardline immigration supporter can't really have an avenue of approach for attacking people who want to put up their own flag in their own nation. So it's an easy thing to do, and it is a point of shared unity, which is a good thing to see. So for once, ending on a positive note, maybe not a positive context, but a positive note, and I think that's a great thing to see. So good luck to our friends across the pond, and we will see how this works out over the next few days and weeks. So that's pretty much all I have for today. Let's wrap things up again with the Intercepted GhostNet reports. Again, another good week. A lot of people starting to use the GhostNet for exchanging information and doing testing and to use a more off-grid manner of communicating. Fantastic to see. These things are very important. Again, the context of satellite communication devices such as Starlink and a lot of the direct-to-cell satellite stuff that's being worked on by major cellular carriers. All of that stuff is good and absolutely necessary to see, but we also want to have a backup, don't we? And radio is one of those ways, especially HF radio is one of those ways to communicate over very long distances with potentially hundreds or thousands of people with nobody in between and nobody really practically being able to jam it either. The GhostNet, for example, has been jammed quite a lot, both intentionally and unintentionally, and the network hasn't really suffered that much for it. It's still quite effective, it still works, and it may not be perfect, it may be very antiquated, very hard to use, very expensive, and there's a lot of cultural problems too within radio, but this is still one line of effort that we can do, one thing in our lives that we can actually control somewhat, and it's a good way to make sure that we can talk to whoever we want to with nobody being able to stop us. So thank you for all of you who make the GhostNet a great thing to see. It would not be what it is without all of you contributing to it and using it and finding it to be a useful thing. Otherwise, it's just me, a crazy dude on the internet with a frequency, and that's not helpful for everybody. But all of you have taken this project and run with it, and now the whole thing is running semi-autonomously, right? I don't have to issue reminders or do anything myself. It just flows, right? And that's a good thing to see. It will get better over time. I'm working on the next version of the plan right now, and I really hope that over the next year we can incorporate some of the more non-radio based stuff into the plan to make it a little bit easier for people to communicate using different methods. I'll just leave it at that. So thank you again for all of your support. Here are the sources as usual, and of course you can get clickable links and more information from my Obsidian page. But that's pretty much all I have for today. Thanks again, and I will see you next time. And as always, fight in the shade.